You're listening to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Here are your hosts, Fran Chismar and Tom Knezik.
Welcome back to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. I am Fran Chismar.
And I'm Tom Knezik. Welcome to episode 209, which is the area code for Mariposa County, California. The only reason I bring that up is because Mariposa is butterfly in Spanish, right?
I believe so, yeah.
It's fitting for...
Now, if you would have asked me to remember, if you would have said, what's butterfly in Spanish, I would have just stared blankly at you. But now that you say it, I remember.
Yeah. But we have another in-person guest today.
I love this.
And one that you've probably heard a little bit about by this episode.
You better have.
Because they're one of our show sponsors, a new show sponsor, and also old friends of ours, a really established nursery, and someone that
we're really excited about.
Yeah, we're excited about some of the changes that they've brought to the nursery industry. So without any more introduction, Bob, would you like to tell everyone a little bit about yourself? And
Sure.
Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. This is great. I'm really excited to do this. So I've been listening to the podcast for a while. My sister has actually been listening for a very long time. So she's probably even more excited than I am. But so my name is Bob Blue.
I want to make sure you give her your autograph when you, when it airs.
I can tell you right now she's not interested. I'm Bob Blue. I'm one of the three owners of the third generation owning Centerton Nursery. We're a wholesale grower in Cumberland County, New Jersey, and we serve the independent garden center industry basically east of the Rockies. Maybe not much of the Gulf Coast states, though we do ship to Tallahassee, strangely enough. But we're selling mainly perennials and shrubs, but also edibles, some roses, and we're just we're trying to promote native plants at the moment. So that's where we are.
Awesome.
Yeah. And one of the things that we get asked all the time, being a native plant nursery, is the native plant fans don't understand why more nurseries aren't growing native plants.
Right.
And they're asking us, well, why doesn't anyone else do this? And, well, why? I don't want to use the language that they do, but sometimes they get a little vulgar about some of the other nurseries and why they can't see the light is one of the concepts they have. And so in your case, you guys kind of did. And you're making a transition.
And it's hard, having spent time in the ornamental nursery industry, I picture a freight train that's moving 100 miles an hour, and you can't stop on a dime.
Right.
And there's a lot of wheels in motion. So I get that. And I don't fault anyone for what they do, and their livelihood, especially. But I think of Centerton, I've always thought of incredible plant material marketing and just idealism.
Yeah. So we've been heavily marketing our products since the 90s. But we started highlighting native plants, mostly cultivars, but a few species, probably not quite 20 years ago, where we had, a few of our retail garden center customers who are a little bit more, they were a little bit more progressively minded at the time. They're like, hey, you're growing X, Y, and Z. We have to tell people that, these are native plants. Is there any way that you could, help us out with that, with your labeling? Because we really take a lot of pride in our labeling. And so we've been highlighting native plants in terms of, what you see on our website and our catalog and on our labeling for almost 2 decades now. But, it really sort of, I wouldn't say smacked us over the head, but about 4 years ago, we were working on a concept for a line of caterpillar butterfly host plants, right? So it's called Caterpillar Candy. And I will give a shout out to a friend of mine, Matt Webster. He manages Damley's Garden Center in Berlin, New Jersey. He had called me up, and I don't even remember what plant he was looking for. It was July. It was slow time of the year for us. And he said, do you have this plant? It's like candy for caterpillars. I'm like, oh my gosh, there it is. Just wrapped up with a bow. And so we started looking at, we were already growing a few Asclepias at the time. We're like, okay, well, all right, what's great for swallowtails, or what's great for, eastern tail blues, looking at, the prettier ones, the ones that people are looking for, the tiger swallowtails. It's okay. Oh, wait, what are their host plants? And now, what ones can we actually grow? What can we make look good in a pot? You know, what can we make marketable for this time of year? And so we ended up with like 15 or 16 different plants. And maybe half of them were native and half of them were not. And one of them was Daucus carota. You know what that is?
No.
Queen Anne's lace.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You know, that's actually black swallowtails
Oh, yeah.
go after that plant.
Yeah, definitely.
And so our operations manager, she said, "Are we really going to sell Queen Anne's lace?" I said, "I don't know."
Yeah.
I mean, people are looking for host plants. This is a host plant. It's actually something that somebody asked us to grow by name. And she said, "Well, I think there's better options than this." And so then that kind of led us down this path of, you know, you're supporting caterpillars, you're supporting butterflies. Now you're feeding the caterpillars. Can you feed the adult butterflies? Okay, well, now you need nectar source plants. And then you start really, it's a really slippery slope.
It is.
And so that kind of led us to, well, I mean, there's a lot of native plants out there, and why aren't we offering them? And so that sort of led my brother and Lauren down this even slipperier slope of, we want to grow all these plants. Some of them are available in the marketplace, some aren't, but no one was doing what we thought was a really exceptional job of making that native plant look like something that can compete on a retail bench.
Yeah.
You know, with the not to knock, I'm not knocking, these are all brands we grow, but the knockout roses of the world and the proven winners of the world. You know, when you go into a garden center, they've got lots of flash, they've got like top-notch labeling, they've got everything to just make a retail customer grab that plant.
Yep.
Right. So my brother has this line of what he wants TrueBlew Natives to be. He wants people to buy native plants by accident.
Yes.
He wants a consumer that doesn't know anything about native plants. Now, don't get me wrong. The native plant people, the native plant retailers, we're building this product to make it as easy as possible for them to sell. But for everyone else, we're making this product so that somebody can walk into a garden center not really knowing what they're looking for and grab that native plant.
Yeah.
We just had this talk. We have this talk all the time, but literally just had this talk with a friend of ours, John Mark Courtney, 2 days ago, and just saying, you know, what's important is some people don't care.
Yeah.
But it's important for them to have at least the accidental option.
Right.
Of picking up a native as opposed to an invasive. Like if you can at least get them in front of it, there's a chance that they'll pick that.
Correct.
But there are a lot of wheels in motion. I'm sorry, I have so many notes. I'm going to go so far off.
I was going to say that's the example I always bring up about like when we talk about the native plant people and growing that circle and getting more and more native plants, and we could get everyone who's interested in gardening putting native plants in their yards, and it still would barely scratch the surface of what we need to do.
Right.
It's the guy who's sitting on his couch watching football on a Saturday. He needs to have a native plant in his garden too. He doesn't know what's in his garden, but he needs native plants there. And he's not going to have that with our current model. By competing with brands like the Knockout Roses and the Summer Hydrangeas and all that, having a product that fits in there where he's going to stumble into that, all of a sudden you're starting, he's not knowing he's doing it, but you're starting to transition in those yards too.
And I'm sorry, go ahead.
Because the educated gardener is going to be seeking this product out anyway, right?
Yep.
But what we have to be realistic with, you know, in terms of growing for the marketplace that it is now, especially post-COVID, is we have, you know, it's funny, for the 30 years I've been doing this, everybody's like, well, how are you going to market to the next generation? How are you going to, all you need is a global pandemic and all of a sudden everybody gets in the garden, right? And believe it or not, a lot of those people have stuck around, whether it's growing houseplants, you know, what was the word is, dogs are the new kids and houseplants are the new dogs, right? So people want to take care, they want something to take care of and they chose plants. So we've actually kept a fair amount of those gardeners post-COVID and they're, right now, a lot of them are basically like a sponge for information. So they're just absorbing a lot of material in a very short period of time. And so they might not know the ecological benefits of planting native plants. You know, they don't know that, you know, more than just providing a host plant for a caterpillar, you know, there's things going on underground, microorganisms, beneficial fungi and bacteria that the root systems of that plant are supporting. Like, they don't know that those things, nor do I think they need to. Mm-hmm. But if we can essentially get them into a garden center and grab, pulling a Zizia aurea instead of something else that's not going to be beneficial to their environment, that's great.
What we loved, especially when we saw your display at the Mid-Atlantic Nursery Trade Show, what I loved about it is, and our concern was, someone's going to do it. We just hope they do it right.
Right.
And you're doing it right. And part of that for me is quality, because for what we do, we grow a high quality plant, but it's mainly going to restoration, and you don't heavily prune something that's going to restoration because it's never going to be pruned ever again. And a forest isn't pruned. It's natural. So what we're doing is natural. For what it is, it's very good quality. But if you were to put that plant in a garden center, you're not going to be as successful unless it's someone that knows what they're looking for.
Right.
But just because we don't prune it that way, this is perception, doesn't mean it can't be pruned that way. And clethra is a great example. Like, our clethra looks good, but if you put it next to your clethra, night and day. But I think a lot of people think that native plants look like what we sell or what you find in nature, not that they can't be.
Not that they can't be retail presentable.
Yeah.
And, part of it's care. Part of it is, the realization that for 20 plus years now of plant breeding, it's all been bred to be, lower impact on the producer to make a smaller, shorter, better branched plant that basically will fit more shelves per cart on a truck. Yeah. Right? Yeah. It's amazing that freight and logistics have guided a lot of plant breeding for the last 20 years. And for good reason. But we've also trained the consumer to expect everything to be small and pretty and bloom for 6 months and never take any input whatsoever on their part. And you know what? Native plants can be that. They just need a little bit more TLC. And we're trying to give them that. Some of this is a learning curve for us as well. We expanded from growing about 300 native cultivars and 10 species to, still 320 on the cultivar side to over 150 species in a matter of 2 years' time. So it's definitely a learning curve.
I think a lot of that is you're at a market that's ready for it. And
without a doubt.
And we had this talk with Steve Castorani also, to go back, and I think it's funny because I'm old enough to remember, and I'm sure some of our listeners have no idea. I remember pre-Home Depot and pre-Lowe's. Like, you go back to the early 90s in this area. Like, I remember living in Delaware, the first Home Depot being built and the first Lowe's being built. Before that, it was all independent garden centers. So that scenery has changed, and that you have to understand how that hurt the independent garden center business. And a lot of these businesses did what they did to survive, I think. So, like, you have those things going on in the past and working up, and then market awareness. You're only as good as the feedback that you get. Like, you got fantastic feedback from a customer with the Caterpillar candy that said, oh, let me think this way because our customers are now ready for it. Where you could have done this 20 years ago and it may not have made an impact at all.
It probably would have fallen flat on its face. I mean, think back to independent garden centers even 10 years ago. The ones that had dedicated space for native plants, they were very few and extremely far between. Now, I would imagine that, I don't think it's all of them, but I would imagine you're probably 60 to 70% of our customers that I walk into, they either have a good working knowledge of what plants are native and where to find them, or they even have dedicated space specifically for native plants in the garden center. And that's obviously consumer driven. That's people walking in and asking where to find them. So, the education of the consumer is happening.
Yeah. I want to back up a little bit because we talked a little bit about your guys' company history, but your grandparents started the nursery, 50 years ago?
Yeah, actually, next year will be our 50th year. Wow. So we're coming up on a nice little milestone there. But my grandfather bought the farm from a friend of his, a friend of his that he used to work at a company called CF Seabrook and Company. They were frozen vegetable farm and processing facility right around the corner from my farm. Still there to this day.
Southern New Jersey was a big bird's eye
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
like area. So.
Yeah, so it was peas and green beans and carrots and they're still and spinach. They're still doing a lot of that to this day. But my dad had worked, or my grandfather had worked there with a gentleman named Donald McAllister, who actually had an interesting life as well. He was working for Illinois Extension Service during World War II, growing hemp to make parachute cords.
Wow.
So anyway, so they had known each other working at CF Seabrook Company, and Donald had bought this land, and I think at the time it was maybe 17 acres, and had started a nursery, and then found out almost immediately that he was up terminal cancer. He had months to live, right? This is in 1974. My grandfather had a meeting with Donald and said, look, I dumped everything I had into this farm. I got nothing left for my wife. I need something. So my grandfather scrounged together all the money he could muster and bought the farm from Donald. And Donald actually lived for having months to live, he lived into the 80s. I remember him as a very young child.
Wow.
But so they started the farm in 1975. They basically just grew ericaceous plants. So azaleas, rhododendrons, pieris, and I think a calmia.
Which were huge at that time.
Yeah, that was it.
Huge,
I mean, in South Jersey, like that was most of what was being grown was ericaceous plants, which is crazy because we basically don't grow any anymore. But
did you know Tom was almost named Eric
This
Casey?
is a fun fact.
Yeah.
My dad was with blueberries. He started out with blueberries. Yeah, you wanted to name me Eric Casey for ericaceous.
Almost.
Yeah, that was very close.
It was like a dad joke before dad jokes were dad jokes. It's a plant nerd's dad joke.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
That's like levels upon levels. So, but anyway, my dad came on board in 1978, I believe, and that we just grew from there. My brother graduated college in 2001, me in 2003, my sister in 2006, and the three of us now run the company and have been for the last 20 some years. So, but still family run to this day. My aunt, my uncle, they still work for us. My dad still has an office. He just comes in and plays his guitar, but he's still around.
And goes on Facebook.
Yeah.
And
I was
goes on
saying,
Facebook.
if you're in the
Yes.
South Jersey Gardeners group,
He's
it's
extremely
he
active.
comments there, and it's like I would say he's probably the most knowledgeable person in there. I don't think a lot of people know who he is.
Yeah.
But it's funny when I see it in other groups too, where you have like people who are in the native plant industry or like big time practitioners and stuff, and they're in these groups and they get into like they say, hey, you might want to. Someone asks a question. Oh, you might want to try this. And there's people arguing with them, and it's like this guy wrote the book on how to do this stuff. I don't think you're like you've been doing this for 6 months now.
He likes playing guitar. He likes riding his motorcycle, and he has to fill his time with something else. And I believe the South Jersey Gardener group on Facebook is a good chunk of his something.
Oh, there's a bunch of
fun.
times I see something. I'm like, with frost warnings is a big one, and there's like, and he puts something up there, and I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. I should probably go cover some stuff.
Yeah.
Well, every once in a while, we're like, hey, Dad, you got to pull back the reins on this a little bit. But for the most part, social media is a weird place, especially when it comes to native plants. You got a lot of people spewing some misinformation. Every once in a while, I don't mind my dad just going on there and setting people straight because, we've been doing it for almost 50 years.
Oh, yeah.
And that's kudos to you for that as well. And I know Tom understands being second generation that taking something that's successful and go from generation to generation and improve upon it isn't easy. And it's probably against the odds considering a fun fact for me, 35 years in the industry, with the exception of Pinelands Nursery, every nursery that I've worked for is no longer in business. So, and a lot of those were family-run business, and eventually it gets to the point where it either doesn't work or there's no interest. So for the fact that there's three of you running a nursery and taking it to another level, extremely impressive and worthy of praise.
My grandfather, he would tell my brother and I, because we started working there, I was 7 when I started working there. Terrible job. We didn't have a maintenance person to fix the aisleways. So my grandfather had a 1970s Cub Cadet riding lawnmower with the mower deck removed, and he bought a little tiny dump wagon, like a half-yard dump wagon, and he paid us $1 per load of clamshells to go around and fill in potholes.
Yeah.
And so my brother, who was a year and a half older, he drove, and I would sit on top of the pile of clamshells with my feet on the yoke of the tractor. Real safe for a 7-year-old. I definitely let my kids do that. But, so that was the way it started. And when we got into high school and we got a little bit more serious about coming into the business, he would sit down and he would tell us often, he says, family businesses, it's typically the third generation that runs them out of business. Mm-hmm. He said it's very few. Like, it's like if you can make it from first generation to second generation, there's maybe like a 70% chance that you get from second to third. And then maybe like a 20% chance that you get beyond that. And so from a very young age, probably too young, he instilled this, innate fear that you are going to run this into the ground unless you just cater your entire life to taking care of this child that I birthed for you. So yes. So I think about that often. It's always the third generation that bankrupts the company. Thanks, Bob. Appreciate that.
Well, it's your offspring, Tom. It's up to Graham. Right now, there's only one. It's up to Graham.
I was going to bring that up too and say, it's like the third generation, second generation. What's it? First generation starts it, second generation grows it, third generation kills it.
Yep.
I got time.
So I would say somewhere in that 11 to 13-year-old is when you start really instilling that fear into them. Make sure that they know that they're going to fail and bankrupt the company.
My first job at the nursery, I don't remember how old I was. And it changed with time. It was, it started out as, hey, I have the irrigation on in these greenhouses. I don't think you can turn it off in less than 2 minutes. It can be bad. And eventually we started saying no. So he'd offer us a quarter. And it was like, if you get back in a minute and a half, I'll give you a quarter.
Yeah. Well, the following year we wanted to be hourly. And so he paid us $1 an hour, to trim junipers. And I realized really quickly that I don't like bending over that much. And that was a very, very harsh taste of reality there.
I remember the first plant I learned, the plant name, botanical and common name, was Crimson Pygmy Barberry, because after you move 1,000 of them in the middle of summer in short sleeves, it doesn't take long before your arms are bloody. I'm like, what is this that I'm sacrificing? I'm bloodletting for.
Yes. Ours was pyracantha.
Oh yeah.
My grandfather never wanted us to grow barberry, and he's like, "What's got thorns all over it?" I'm like, "You made me propagate pyracantha for 3 days straight."
So, for our listeners that don't know, pyracantha is firethorn.
Firethorn.
Actually, pyracantha is Latin for firethorn.
Yeah, that's correct, and it has an oil that's secreted by the thorns that most people's skin will react to. So you end up with tiny little red welts everywhere.
Yeah, while landscaping, I had a thorn puncture right through the webbing between my thumb and my forefinger. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Those are
I'm glad the podcast audience can't see the face I just made.
But thank you for the history on that, and that's important because it's like Tom was saying. Everyone's always like saying, "Why aren't more people doing this?" There's a history and there's a reason, and it's not just the nursery history; it's an industry reasoning, but it needs certain things to take it to the next step. I really feel your marketing takes what some people do, but does it better and takes it in another. So even if it's in a garden center with a staff that isn't knowledgeable about native plants and a customer that comes in isn't knowledgeable about native plants, regardless of why they pick it up, they're going to learn something.
Right.
And that's, to me, the most important thing because you have one shot to win them over, maybe. Yeah. And if they're not successful, they can say, "What's this? I'm not doing this again."
Yeah, and you know what? And some of these native plants, like we're trying to be very descriptive with our labeling. Like some of them are going to work much better in certain conditions than others. That's one of the things I try to tell people about is so much is about soils. You look at like ecoregions and everything. Why plants have done so well in certain regions and not? It's mainly due to soils. A bird is not going to decide at the Delaware River that, no, I'm not going to fly across that river, or the rain's not going to stop there. It's the soils and the makeup of how glaciers move dirt around. And so how do you do that on the back of a, 20 square inch label in 8-point font. You know, there's only so much that we can do, but we try our best to educate them. Say like, hey, this is the type of region that this is native to. Try doing it this way or that way. Because on the flip side, you know, one man's native is another man's invasive, right? And so you got to find that right spot where it's going to perform well and not take over. And you know, that's the fact of the matter with every single thing that we grow. But, you know, so it's a lot of education in a very short period of time.
But what you don't fit on there, you can find on your website as well.
We try.
And Tom and I were looking through the website yesterday, and what I love about the line, it could be real easy to just hit the things that you know look good.
Sure. That
are going to have curb appeal. But for native plants, there's a lot of function. It's not just curb appeal, it's functionality and is it in Talamy terms, is it not a detractor? What were the three?
Contributor, non-contributor, or detractor. And I was talking to Marty McHugh's wife last night, and I could not remember the third detractor for the life of me. I'm like, there's contributors and non-contributors, and he has another term. And
distract. But
I don't remember what it is.
Yeah, some plants, even though they may not have a showy bloom, are contributors for many reasons. So just going through your line and seeing, oh, they have tussock sedge. They have, you know, if you have areas in your property that you're trying to work with to say, oh, this is really wet. This is going to be really wet for 6 months of the year and dry. I don't know what to do, but I'd like to use native plants. You're offering something that a lot of people that are doing this aren't offering.
Yeah. There's a level of functionality that you get out of some native plants that you just can't. It's hard to replicate that.
What got you to that point to say we need to add these to that line?
I mean, a lot of it was a couple of different reasons. One is we knew if we were going to actually have a line, right, an actual offering, it needed to be not complete because I can't do it all. I definitely can't do what Pinelands does. Can't.
But you don't need to.
Need to.
You don't need to.
But at the same time, it couldn't be 20 plants. Yeah. Right? We knew out of the 150 that we're shooting for by next year, we knew that 75 of them were no-brainers. You know, maybe 30 of those we were already doing in some way, shape, or form. About another 25 were things where we need to do a little bit of learning, need to do a little bit of discovery about how best to get them looking good at retail. And then another 25 to 30 are things that are a bit more on the functional side that are great to offer that you know, we also sell to some landscapers that we're going to have somebody come in. And, you know, perfect example, one of the few species that we've done for a long time and done in big numbers is Carex pennsylvanica, right? Yeah. That's a plant that, you know, without any marketing attached to it, they'll sit around the farm for 6 months, and then somebody will come in and be like, I need 800 of them, right? It's just one of those plants that when somebody needs it, they need a lot of it, right? So some of it's that. But the other part is, you know, when you're going, you know, when you're just Jane and Joe Smith going into a garden center looking for plants, they're redoing a bed or part of their garden or maybe even a mixed container. You know, there are certain things that they're looking for. You know, they're looking for a flowering shrub or they're looking for an evergreen or a perennial and grasses. And you know, quite frankly, you know, ornamental grasses is going to be one of the toughest things to replace. You know, 20 years ago, we were a much smaller nursery than we are now. We were probably selling 100,000 miscanthus. Now we're selling 3,000 miscanthus, right? And how we've done that? We've done that by finding ornamental grasses that will work better or do just as good a job and look that pretty, you know, that whimsical blowing in the wind sort of look. And, you know, sometimes you need that. You need that different texture or that different color or that different size. But yeah, so that's kind of how we it was not a 5-minute conversation that we came to our list.
And that's, you know, again, history, you go back 25 years, I want to say that the landscape for ornamental grasses was Miscanthus, Pennisetum, Imperata.
Yeah.
You know, Imperata cylindrica rubra, which is Japanese bloodgrass, which is like now listed invasive, but these weren't known as invasive back then.
No.
So that was what the landscape was, and there wasn't a call to arms saying, hey, these are bad, don't do it. It was, we need more, we need more, we need more.
Yeah.
So it just takes time and education for these things to happen and then stop that from rolling to do the research, like what works better? What are some of these native plants to do it? I think you touched on a big thing that a lot of people forget. So for what we do, it's a lot of small sizes. So if you're getting herbaceous, it's flats of 50, which is great for a landscaper doing a restoration project. Not good for a homeowner that's doing something on their property. They can't buy.
Yeah,
they don't
have
need
a
50
10 by
of something.
10 space they need to fill.
But what that limits also, I'm not even thinking about the homeowner making purchases. If a homeowner wants a landscape contractor to come in and do a native landscape, they also don't need 50 plugs. They may need 10 1-gallons to make an impact. And to be quite honest, that's what limits landscapers wanting to do that kind of work, because the material is not available, and it means that they can be profitable.
Right.
You're changing that to where not just a homeowner can walk into a garden center and buy something. Their landscaper can plan a landscape project that can be natives on someone's property without killing.
Well, I'll take it one step further. You now have a lot of municipalities around the country that are starting to mandate that if you're going to redo your yard, you have to replace at least a certain percentage of it with something native. And we've had a lot of customers reach out to us saying like, hey, we're glad you're growing this stuff just because we needed it just to fulfill some necessary, to fulfill a municipality need.
Yep.
Some municipalities, I will admit, have probably taken it a little bit too far. We actually knew of one in a, I'm just going to say a northeastern state. A municipality was starting to say that you had to replace a certain percentage with native species of seed collected in that county.
Yeah.
There are no nurseries in that county
Yeah.
that would harvest seed. And
Or
I
maybe
guess,
you don't have access to even collect seed.
well,
in
and
those,
that's it.
you know.
Like you guys do an amazing job of keeping seed banks and keeping, you guys have got, just, cold storage upon cold storage of locally harvested seed that you're keeping track of where it came from and where it's going to and everything. It's a process that you built over years.
Yeah.
And they just assumed that you could just snap your fingers and make that happen. And so, there's some thought process that needs to go into a lot of this stuff.
But it's even like to take that one step further. And I think I've talked about this on the podcast at one point. It was before I worked here. There was a large project in Jamaica Bay, New York. And it was because Jamaica Bay is National Park Service and it was Army Corps of Engineer. They wanted plants only grown from seed from Jamaica Bay. Okay. But because it's National Park Service, no one has permission to collect seed at Jamaica Bay.
I see where you're going with this.
So they wanted something that no one could provide at any means.
Right.
Except for the New York State Nursery, which created a monopoly, which started a whole nother chain of events.
Yes.
But then it finally came down to they would collect the seed and they had to supply it for free to whoever the contractor chose to grow the plants. But even that came down to we may put 5 seeds per plug. They were giving us enough for 1 seed per plug. So we weren't able to produce the quality of plant that people were accustomed to getting from us. Yeah. So there's so many limitations that way. We love seed collected plant material. Obviously, that's what we do. But it's not always. Sometimes it gets so narrowed, they make it impossible. And when it's impossible, it's failure. And then failure takes it in another direction.
Yeah. I mean, we're running into a little bit of that. We had, when we were announcing this line last fall, we had our customer open house in October. And we had a customer who was very, very stringent native plant nursery. And I give them credit for that. Where they are and what they're doing is amazing. But they were really upset when they heard that our native ferns are being grown from tissue culture. I get it. But spore growing ferns is really tough. And it's not saying that I don't want to do hard things. We do plenty of hard things. Growing ferns from spores is not something I'm interested in doing.
Listen, we've done it.
Yeah.
It was like a 5-year process.
Yes.
Because we would collect the fronds, send the spores to tissue culture lab to have them
to grow
gametophytes.
Yeah, grow gametophytes.
And then we basically had a lab where everything was. What was the product? The spongy green product.
That was
cubes?
Oasis cubes.
Yeah, Oasis cubes, grown in the Oasis cubes under light. Were they in the beds that would?
We had ebb and flow
beds. You know what? at the end of the day, no one's paying for what that plant costs to grow.
No.
So we have a source. We know the ferns that we use are we no longer grow them ourselves. We get liners in, and it's a Connecticut source. But is it better to not have them at all or to do it that way?
Yeah, and the argument can also be made, specifically with ferns. A lot of the ferns that we're growing now have basically been unchanged since the Jurassic period. You know, they're a very genetically stable plant, and there's not a lot of biodiversity among ferns. You know, but you know, I understand why they wanted it spore grown, and I get it. But at the same time, we cannot charge $50 retail for a 1 gallon fern. No one is going to pay that.
And you can't hold everyone to your own standards too. Like that's great if that's what you want to do.
Right.
But you can't expect that everyone has that high of a ceiling.
Yeah.
Especially like you're doing hay-scented fern, which is not an easy plant to grow in a nursery environment at all.
Right.
So is it better to make it available or to just say no one's going to have you can't have hay-scented fern.
Right.
You know, and that's an important because you're thinking of a dry fern. Most of the ferns that we have are you look at wet and shady. To be able to offer that is really important.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'd rather have a tissue culture grown fern than no fern at all.
Yeah,
that's what it comes down to.
Yeah,
it's would be a giant environmental ethic debate.
Yes,
it's basically what it comes down to.
You know, the other thing too is, and at some point, this is going in a whole nother direction. Like it's wonderful that we're able to wild collect for what we do, but at some point, if everyone went in that direction, it's not. That's like saying like if everyone became a vegetarian, there wouldn't be enough food for everyone.
Right.
If everyone did seed collected plants, you'd be hurting the environment. It's not feasible, I think, to wild collect because you'd be hurting wildlife. You're taking way more. Like if you want to respect, you don't collect everything from one tree. You go to multiple big communities. You take a little bit. If you were to scale this up times 50, it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
So what do you do? You're looking. Do you not agree with me?
No, I definitely agree with you in one location,
especially when you're taking out the fact that we're not allowed to collect on on state land
properties,
because you can't profit from what you're taking from state land.
Yeah,
like that's a no. So we're limited to private land that we have permission to. So we're all for it. And don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's horrible what we do. I love what we do. Just if you look at trying to hold everyone to that standard, I don't know that it's feasible.
Fran, I said this the last time I was here. I'll say it again today. I am so glad that you guys do the seed stuff, that I don't have to. I can just know where my material is coming from and not have to worry about everything that you just said.
Yeah.
But you've aligned yourself with great people of that thinking, which I think is wonderful.
I'll give a shout out to Steve Castorini at North Creek and John at Kind Earth and you guys. I mean, it's a very welcoming community. As we've spent the last 4 years, getting deeper and deeper into this stuff, it's been a really great ride to be on.
Yeah,
we love having nurseries like you to be able to work with for this because it goes twofold. We get pressured to do it.
Yeah.
We don't want to do it. We like what we do. We would rather partner with a wonderful nursery like you and help you be successful than us have to do that.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to hit on at one point, is because over the years we've had, I want to back up and make sure I get a full thought out and not just the part. A lot of folks would say, because we're a wholesale nursery, like, well, why can't you? I buy your plants. Well, we're a wholesale nursery. Oh, well, what retail places do you sell to that I can buy your plants? I'm like, well,
we don't.
Not really any, because they don't want what we have. And they're like, well, why don't they want what you have? And I'm like, well, that's a much bigger conversation.
Sure.
It's like, it gets a little bit deeper. They need to have something that they can put on a shelf that someone's going to walk in and buy. And unless you're the one walking in the door, most people are not buying this. And it just doesn't, from the person who doesn't know, it's not going to look right. And then, like, you kind of have to, it's better if you have it in a branded program versus having it in a black pot.
Right.
So it's just the colorful pot just draws people's attention and more people buy them. And when you have those endless summer hydrangeas and the knockout roses and all the stuff, the proven winner stuff that's in the branded pot, people buy that before they're going to buy something in the black pot.
Well, and you need to know what you're up against.
Yeah. So then they're like, well, why don't you start a brand? And I'm like, I think you don't understand how hard it is to do that.
And I don't know that we ever divulged this, but probably I want to say it was like 16 years ago, we opened up a little retail area in the nursery, and we grew herbaceous in 1 gallons. We grew shrubs and trees in larger pots, made a full set up a little garden center, made a full presentation, advertised it, and in 1 year, I think we had 10 customers. So, I mean, we knew at that point, like, all right, maybe the public's not ready for this. But back then, no one knew what a rain garden was, and I can you can do that questionnaire now, and you'd have a lot better answer.
And I think that's probably the next step that we're going to take with TrueBlew Natives is, the solution-based side of it. It's the butterfly and pollinator gardens. It's the rain gardens. It's that next step that, the consumer, again, who might not be looking for a native plant, a lot of them are not looking. A lot of them are walking into a garden center without any specific thing in mind. Most of the time they're looking for pretty.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times now they're looking for solutions, right? They're looking for a solution to a problem or a spot or a place that they have in mind. And so let's give it to them, and let's do it with native plants.
Yeah, no, that's a great thing. And you went through the Eagle program with Charlie Hall, and that's a big thing I think he pushes is people aren't buying what's the fact points, they're buying benefits.
Right.
So it's like, what is herb solutions? What does it actually do for me? Not even when you're looking at a car, it's not, it has this. I'm trying to think. The seatbelts are made out of whatever, some special cloth.
Yeah.
It's like, this is gonna make sure your kid is secure in the back is what you care about. Yes. You don't care about what the seatbelt's made out of. But and that's what you can do for plants. So I'm thinking rain gardens. I have an area that I want to divert water to, or it already gets a little wet. What's going to work there? What grows under black walnut is a question we get a ton too.
Yeah.
So it's like all of a sudden you have something that's like, these are things that grow under black walnut.
Were you the one that just forwarded me the list?
Did, yeah.
The list of plants that will take jug loan that you can plant under black walnut, which was
amazing.
That was
sent to me by Bill from Davy Tree, and I think Amy Green sent it to him.
Yeah.
So
what was interesting though, it wasn't all native, so there were actually a fair amount of invasives on the list.
That's great. I know Missouri Botanic Gardens, their website, which is a fantastic thing. They now list, tolerates deer, rabbit, black walnut.
Yep. Yeah. So when I had my thought before, what I wanted to really ask you is to create this brand. How much time did it take? If you want to throw out a dollar figure, you don't have to. But I kind of want to put in perspective when people are seeing this.
It's not an easy
store,
task.
It's something that took a lot of time and a lot of resources to put together. Yeah.
So I'll take you back to the late 80s, early 90s, right? And maybe you guys remember, what did plant labels look like then? If you were a really good nursery, you had like a 2.5 by 2 inch tag with a 6-point font name of the plant and a postage stamp size picture. And on the back, it basically had, this is this plant, and it gets 2 feet tall and 2 feet wide.
I want to say Monrovia kind of started to change it maybe in the early 90s, where maybe it was like a little book. Not a book, but like a small 2x2 like bifold.
So we didn't have a lot of money back then. We were a much smaller company than we were, but we wanted something to stand out a little bit. So we could only afford a stick tag, right? One color printing front and back. Mm-hmm. So what did we do? We made them blue instead of black. Yeah. Blue ink instead of black ink. That's all it was.
Yeah.
Right. And so fast forward a couple of years, and people were saying these blue labeled perennials are really flying off the shelves.
Yeah.
People are coming in, they're asking for the perennials with a blue label. And, my dad, along with a couple of people around the farm, were saying, okay, let's roll with this. And so it was actually our first trademark was blue, BLEW, like the family's last name, label perennials. And so that trademark's been in place for upwards of 35 years.
Wow.
And so how long has it taken to build this brand? A long time.
What was the superhero character from the early 90s?
Gosh,
Captain?
why do you have to bring up Captain Nursery?
Captain Nursery, that's it. I knew it was Captain of something. I couldn't remember what it was.
I hope and pray that my dad does not listen to this episode of this podcast. Sorry, guys.
We had a Captain Nursery
there were cutouts?
cutouts that had like a stick where you could put it in the
Yes,
ground.
yeah.
We had those at Princeton that we would bring to our like picnics. So Captain Nursery would be with us.
There were Captain Nursery comic books.
Oh.
Or coloring books. There was
like that.
Captain Nursery on the back of every tag. Captain Nursery was... I cannot believe I'm talking about this, guys.
But you know what? There was nothing like that at that
No,
point.
there wasn't.
There
So
wasn't.
the thought process is, Captain Nursery was going to, fix all of your gardening problems and lead you to a better place in your garden. And it wasn't planned this way, but Captain Nursery looks remarkably like my dad.
Like your dad.
But a much more fit version of my dad. And so it didn't last long.
But
But
here's the thing. I remember it 25 years later.
that is crazy.
Which
yes.
is the important thing.
Every once in a while, we'll find some of that like marketing material in like a storage container somewhere. It's like, hey, look, there's another Captain Nursery coloring book. But so Blue Label, the brand, has been around for over 30 years, and we switched to putting everything in our signature blue container probably about 16, 17 years ago, and that's when it really, really exploded in the marketplace because it was something that people could see from 50 feet away. They see that blue container, and they're like, oh, I bought an echinacea from that brand last year, and it did well, so they're going to come back to it. And so we've tried to do as much as we could of marrying product to that parent brand. And so when we wanted to expand out our natives program, we kind of felt like it needed to fall under that Blue Label umbrella of plants. And TrueBlew was a name that we came up with. We had 35 or 40 different ideas and concepts for brand names. We have a patent and trademark attorney that we send ideas to, and he'll kind of say, oh, you could do this, you could do that, you could, you'd have to work around this other existing trademark or something, and so on and so forth. And TrueBlew had a lot of tie-ins. It was just one of those things that it's got the BLEW that ties in with Blue Label. At the time we were thinking a lot of people were asking for species form, true species form natives. And so TrueBlew is kind of what came out of it. In terms of time, it probably took us 6 to 9 months of planning in terms of the branding, the marketing, the labeling, and probably that over again, just educating ourselves and talking with guys like you and Kind Earth and North Creek and a bunch of different seed banks, and just learning all that we could learn in a short period of time as possible, because we also wanted to get this material on the market. So I think the inception of this line was probably about 3 years ago, and we just started shipping it this year.
And I love, and it's real easy, and you'll know, you can walk through a large trade show and you can see native plants all of a sudden like put as a phrase on the back of a backdrop. But some of that is people just trying to cash in, because you look at what they're saying is a native plant, maybe isn't. It's just like, hey, we have these two.
Sure.
But what you're doing is completely different, and for different reasons.
And I'll brutal honesty, that was us 20 years ago. Because somebody said, "Oh, you're selling Rudbeckia Goldstrom. That's native, and people don't know it. You should put it on your labeling." All right, sure, we'll stick it on the label.
Yeah.
Hey, it's native.
Yeah.
And that was it. And so without getting into the whole concept of the host plants and ecology, and then you find guys like Crime Pays but Botany doesn't.
Yep.
Like future guest on the podcast, actually.
Oh gosh, I want to be in the room when he's here. But that learning that stuff, you start to realize this is way bigger than just a marketing campaign for a couple of native plants.
Yeah.
How is it?
Fran, I'm just not to get too off topic with that, because I'm really looking forward to when
Joey
he comes on.
Yeah.
We may want to look into actually getting him physically here if that's possible.
He visited Pizzo Nursery in Illinois. He'd love it here.
Yeah,
He'd gobble it up.
and Pizzo's the great people.
Yep.
They're wonderful people.
Oh yeah. And we're utilizing some of their, because we have customers in the Midwest, and so now, as strange as it is, they're harvesting seed and growing liners in the Midwest, shipping them to New Jersey, where we're growing them out, making them look pretty, putting them in a nice package, and then shipping them back out.
But that's the right way. I mean, that's and I love.
Tom, you and I were just talking about. We've got a customer in
finding
Texas
someone from further south, and I put a couple texts out. I haven't gotten much yet, but then I was up this morning. I'm like, I should call my friend Dudley and see if he knows anyone. And there's a couple other folks that I was like, I should reach out to them and see if they do it. So
something I never would have dreamt I would do 5 years ago, looking for a native plant nursery in Louisiana. That's new.
Yeah.
No, that's definitely more
I'd
recent
even put that out
revelation.
to some of our listeners for feedback too. Just if they're, because we have listeners from all over the place, so they may have folks that
someone
they know
can
that
recommend.
they can recommend. Yeah.
Like I know in Louisiana they have state nurseries that do native plants, obviously for coastal resiliency. Kind of like our Cape May Plant Material Center, they have that in Louisiana too, where they're doing it. So maybe that would even be a good place to start contacting them and see who they're selling to that may be growing them.
Right.
So that's a decent idea. So considering this just started in October, or is really like launched in October, how's the feedback been?
Feedback so far has been good. I mean, it's April, right? It's still fairly early for us.
It's just starting.
We're just coming into the peak of our season. But I can say, based on sales, the material that we've gotten up to what we consider a retail-ready quality is selling extremely well in terms of getting from wholesale to retail. We'll know more in essentially 3 weeks.
I was going to say in another month, you'll know how it's.
We'll know. I mean, right now, we did take pre-orders for material, and it actually exceeded our expectations to the point that we this week are planting backup crops to a few items, not a ton, but there's a few that we know we can make still look good, for this year, for say June, July sales. And so we're doing some backup crops of those things that we're like, whoa, that was, you grow a certain amount and all of a sudden you got bookings for twice that amount. And, some of these things we knew we could do a good job on, or we'd already grown them. And others were dipping our toe, and we should have, maybe gone like ankle to knee deep instead of toe. And so we're learning that people are looking for this material. I think they've probably been bringing it in from a local native plant nursery or a local grower, and they'd have to bring it in small quantities because, and I don't want to say anything bad about anybody, but walk into a retail garden center, and what you see pretty plants, big labels, lots of marketing, and that's what draws retail consumers' eyes. And so by putting native plants into that package, I think we might be entering an untapped market.
Stay tuned for more of the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Welcome back to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery.
I think I'm hoping that you'll find too that it's creating a solution for nurseries in a way also, like having been on your end. And Tom, I don't like the amount of work that goes through supplying garden centers in the summer with what's hot. Like putting out hot lists, like this is what looks good now. If you're selling on functionality and people are looking for functionality, maybe that eases a little bit of that. It doesn't have to be in bloom right now. It just needs to be available.
That's some of the feedback I've heard from, Daryl Kabeski from Sunset Farmstead, who's been on a bunch of times. They they're in the American Beauties program, and he was saying a lot of the garden center feedback they get is they're like, I don't know much about native plants, but I know my customers want this, and they will walk past 10 things that are blooming to pick up this, like, just little barely green leaves sticking out of the dirt. And I don't understand why, but they're doing it, so send me more.
Right.
And it is kind of changing somewhat, where people are, as they're learning more about native plants, and you have the passionate buyers who are really into it already. But I think that group is growing. That are walking in, and it doesn't need to be a hot plant at the moment. It can. Buying on functionality, not
because there are those programs. We're going to sell you what's hot, and if it doesn't sell within the week, we'll take it back and bring you something different. Like there's That's a lot. That's a
Yeah.
lot. That's a
Yeah.
lot.
And I think that's still important.
Yeah.
Like there's
Yeah,
going to be
it
people
is.
who always buy that way.
Yes.
But I think that group is growing.
And these can
doesn't buy
fit
that way.
in that group as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you can sell it on functionality or purpose, and I think education is just going to keep continuing. I think the people that want it, hopefully that circle grows, they become more knowledgeable. I think hopefully that's a solution for nurseries to ease that pain.
Yeah. I mean, you got to tell the story, right?
Yeah.
You know, that's what it is. And you do that with a little bit of marketing, a little bit of branding, some good labeling, and some signage. And that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
I think the better nurseries in our industry, that's who they are and that's what they do. They're not selling plants, they're selling themselves. So it's who you are, what you do, and you want people to want to do business with you. And I think that's I mean that says a lot for how long Centerton's been there and everything that you do.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a major case. So have you had other nurseries contact you and ask you questions?
Not yet. I do feel, you know, you're talking about American Beauties. There's a lot of growers out there that are already doing that line. We like that line a lot. I don't there's nothing wrong with that line at all. For us, the buy-in to grow TrueBlew, you know, there's an amount of oversight that I'm not sure I have the bandwidth to do right now. You know, because this is hard.
Yeah.
You guys know this, right?
Yeah.
You've been doing it for a long time. You know, going back to our conversation from 3 minutes ago, looking for, you know, native plant growers in different parts of the country to supply, you know, different ecotypes. There's a lot of work that goes into this, and I don't want to entertain the notion of somebody that just wants to. I forget how you put it, Fran. You said it better than jumping on the bandwagon.
Oh, cashing in.
Cashing in.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're not looking for that. We're not. You know.
And it's obvious. It's obvious.
This is turned into a bit of a passion project of ours, for all the right reasons. And you know, there's going to be somebody someday that wants to do it the same way that we're doing it. And you know, in my dream world is get somebody in California to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, because you know that whole Arizona, you know, Western New Mexico, Arizona, California market, Nevada market. There's some really cool stuff going on out there with native plants, and I'm not seeing, you know, I don't think American Beauties is really on the West Coast.
Yeah,
at
I think
all.
they have a grower in like Colorado, but that's about it.
But we know, like, even the head groundskeeper at Dodger Stadium redid the grounds where it's all native.
Yeah.
But each area is a different like this represents Arizona, this represents Mexico, this represents.
So cool.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
And everything's labeled. So as you're walking through, you can see that's going to help educate. Like, all those things help the movement.
Yes.
Like, greatly. So.
And you know what? Part of that movement is doing what we're trying to do. Is a lot of people have reached out to us saying, "Hey, I've been looking for this plant. I can't get it. I can't find that plant." And maybe it actually was in the garden center that they were in, but they didn't. You know, they get wowed by all the pretty pictures and all the pretty plants. You know, it's really.
And
if you've ever been to the California Spring Trials, you see the breeding and the amazing marketing and what some of those bigger companies are doing, creating plants that are just stunningly beautiful and are going to bloom for 6 months without you doing a darn thing to them. And you walk into a garden center not knowing, it's really hard to walk by that plant.
Yeah, it is. And it's funny you say that with marketing, like what started. So we have meetups for native plant nurseries at the trade shows, which started with Jack Pizzo.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Coming saying, you know, in California, the wine industry wasn't successful until they got together and said, if we work together and market this together, we can make the whole California wine industry a destination. Right. Yeah. He's like, so why is it that native plant nurseries don't work together? And that's kind of was like the mic drop. And then everyone started thinking about it.
You know, there's a difference though. You know, it's how many varieties of grapes are they growing in California?
I know.
And how many SKUs do you guys grow again? How many thousands? You know,
no, what's
ours is in individual SKUs is
in the
I
hundreds.
think like 600, 500, 600.
Oh gosh,
individual species is probably like a little less than 300. So SKUs is probably more, closer to 1,000. I know at one point,
but we're not
like,
over 1,000.
It was like 20 200.
Yeah, it was.
But that was because we had stuff like broken down by sizes, and it
Right,
was like,
yes.
okay, you want a red maple? Well, do you want it like 2 foot or 3 foot,
Yeah,
4 foot, 5
yeah,
foot?
true.
And
But
that's
if
added a lot of SKUs.
if you pull back the curtain a little bit on the nursery industry too, just to go back to something you said, when someone tells you they can't find something, you really have to vet that information too,
Right. Yeah.
Because we get told, "Oh, if you had this, I would buy it from you all the time," and then you have it, and no one buys it from
Oh
you.
yes.
So,
You know, we have a long-standing landscape customer of ours, one of our first customers, and he said, "Oh, you got to grow this plant. Or you got to grow that plant." I'm like, "How many are you going to buy?" He goes, "I'll buy at least 15 a year." 15. I'm sorry, I can't do that. I just can't do that. You know, and then there's the flip side. You know, there's some of those plants that are just like, man, if we could grow this, we could really sell the hell out of it. And it just, but they're tough. I mean,
and that's huge. Like some items you don't know the demand until you have them. Because when I started here, no one was doing ferns, and like at that point, you think you don't really see them on specs, so maybe there's no demand. And then as soon as you have them, they blow out, and everyone's like, "We've been waiting."
yeah,
You know, and it's for every one that you grow that ends up not selling, there's one that you wish you had grown 10 times as many.
Yeah.
yep,
And that's one of the hard things to know, because there's only so much space and so much time, and you need to dial it in to get it right. And you're going through this information, and you're like, all right, how much of this is accurate? And that's difficult, because we get that all the time. It's like, I would buy every 7-gallon that you grow, and then 5 years later, they haven't bought one.
right.
Yeah.
7-gallon. You're like, okay.
That is a real example.
That's a
Fran
real
bringing
example.
up.
That is a
Yeah.
Did you turn to them and say, "Do you know how many 7 gallons we do grow?"
Well, at that point in time, I
All
don't
of
think
them.
we
You
grew
want all
any.
of them.
yeah.
And that was
we didn't grow any.
we
That's
had,
what started the line.
Our whole seed business was built on 2 conversations that we had with customers that were like, "Oh, we want to buy seed from you. We're like, we know you collect all this seed. And if you were to grow your own, like, we buy tons of seed, and we'd buy all this seed from you." And I think those people have bought
almost none.
But
Because what it came,
but we've
But you
came
built
into a
that
thriving
section of the
enterprise
business.
of our business.
but they're still doing seed. What it
Yeah.
came down to is like, well, I've been over the years, I've been very loyal to you getting plants, and I don't buy them from anyone else. But I feel bad now because I've always been loyal to this company, and I don't want to.
And I understand that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was
Sure.
like, oh yeah, someone said, "Hey, why don't you do this?" And we did.
And we did.
We'll buy a bunch from you, and we did, and then they didn't buy anything from us. But it worked out. But
It did work out. I mean, we're sold out, so it created a new market for us. Fortunately,
And that's people have already asked. One of our sales reps, in fact, said, "You know, we really should be growing some of this native stuff in 7s and 10s." And I'm like, "That's not us. It's not our market. We're going up to a 3-gallon pot, and that's going to be where we top out at."
Yeah.
So yeah, if somebody's interested and wants to, like, you know, re-sleeve some 7s into a blue container and slap a TrueBlew, as long as I can vet where their plant material's coming from, that would definitely be something I'd talk about.
and that's the thing. It's you have to have those hard conversations with, like, this is who you are or who we are and what you do well.
Yeah.
And you can't just keep adding and adding and adding and diluting it. How do you become important to your core customers and stay important? We've had this conversation, again, pulling back the curtain, 5-gallon and 7 gallons. And the 5 gallons are new for us last summer, and we're sold out. Like, people love them. But they take up a lot of space.
A lot.
And they're not as profitable. And it's great to be sold out, but you can't dedicate any more space. So if you can't grow it, at some point, for the customers you're making happy, over time, is it going to get diluted? Or as their business grows and you can't grow with them, are you going to become less important to them? So are you doing yourself a disservice by not growing it, or by growing it?
We're having that conversation right now. Mother's Day roses.
Mm-hmm.
We don't make a single solitary cent on Mother's Day roses. And they're expensive.
Yeah.
We charge a lot of money for them, and we're not making a dime.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had this conversation regularly this time of year, typically when downy mildew rears its ugly head. It's like, can we stop this? What would we lose if we stopped doing it entirely? And we're still doing them. Still doing
Well,
it.
we've
But
had,
I question it.
we had that
Every year.
with erosion control. When I started here, erosion control was 25% of our business, and the amount of space that it takes is huge. But by the time we ended it, it was 5% of our business, and it was a completely different customer base. And it was like, at one year we looked at it, it's like we didn't really have any growth. But if you dissect it, we did away with a whole product line and didn't lose any business.
Yeah.
And that's hard. Those are hard. They're really hard conversations to have.
Well, going through Eagle program,
Yeah.
the whole topic of conversation on SKU rationalization.
Yep.
It's a lot to take in. And some of them are your babies, right?
Oh, yeah.
We discontinued, my grandfather, God rest his soul, rolling over in his grave when I say this, we stopped growing azaleas 2 years ago. Just stopped. We weren't doing a good job doing them. We were losing money, not breaking even, losing money on every single azalea that we sold. And, I tell everybody, it's like no square pegs and round holes.
Yeah.
And that was a big one for us. It's just a big old round peg trying to go into a square hole. It just wasn't working no matter how hard we hit it with a hammer. And we walked away from it. And some of our customers were upset. At the same time, it's like those 3 or 4 customers that are bummed out that we're not growing, Ellie Harris in a 3-gallon anymore. They're still buying other stuff. Our sales have not been detrimentally affected because we walked away from something. We were doing a really poor job. And that's what I tried to say. Like, look, you can talk to these 4 guys that are going to go use such a nicer azalea and we'll give you everything else.
It's hard. So it's one of our friends locally that was mentioned already today. The owner loved magnolias. Like how many SKUs of magnolias they had at the nursery, and that was part of the Eagle program.
Also,
it's like
that Eagle program.
It's like, how many of each of these are you really selling? Yeah. Like, it's your passion and it's your love.
Yeah.
But how much is this hurting you as a business?
And the conversations were, well, no one is buying this. And then the retort was, but they should be buying it.
Right.
That doesn't mean that they will. So I think that's a good lead into another question that I wanted to bring up. And that is, I know you guys have voluntarily given up selling some of the invasive species that are out there, even though we don't have legislature in New Jersey saying that you had to yet. It's coming. It's going to happen. But what was some of the reasoning behind that? Why did you and your sister and your brother kind of go down that path?
Well, so we stopped growing. You're going back a long time. We used to sell, when we were a much smaller farm than we are now, we used to sell thousands and thousands of Lithrum a year.
Yeah. That was a huge,
huge crop for us.
I remember being at the Connor Pyle Company, and the amount of Lithrum we went through was absurd.
We'd sell it in 2s and 3s. We'd sell it in the spring pre-bloom. We'd sell the 3s in flower. And then you start to realize, like, this is probably not a good thing.
Yeah.
One of the things that really opened me up, this is probably 15 years ago, 16 years ago. I don't even remember why, but I was in the Poconos during the summertime and out in the woods, and I just see a carpet of Berberis thunbergii. I mean, nothing else in this section where I was, just barberry everywhere as far as the eye could see. And that scared me a little bit. I will be brutally honest. That scared me a little bit. And at that time, we were just getting into growing some barberry. Most of them were sterile. Some were not. And you start to realize that what we do as an industry has effects. My least favorite plant in the world is a calorie pear. Mm-hmm. When they're blooming in the springtime is probably my least favorite week of the year. Yeah. Because it just reminds me of just how destructive something can be. That was done with good intention. Those were brought into this country and used a lot in DOT work, right? A lot of it in New England and Mid-Atlantic states. A lot of government work was brought in, and they used calorie pears because they could be reproduced fairly well, and they were pretty, and look at where we are with those now. And so when you see stuff like that, right now is the Wisteria sinensis is going crazy. Yep. So I always call that beautiful destruction. Yep. So these things that we do, these things that we grow, they do have lasting effects on the world around you. So you make the tough decision, right? Mm-hmm. We used to do a really good job with the miscanthus. We sold them far and wide. And when New York outlawed it, unless you put the big sticker on the pot, we started putting the big sticker on the pot. Mm-hmm. And then you ride back and forth. My in-laws live in Western PA. And so we'd get on the turnpike at Valley Forge, and there's a spot between the Valley Forge and Media exits where at some time a miscanthus seed planted itself on a hillside next to that. Yeah. And the wind of the trucks going by have pushed it, and now there's a good mile stretch where there are hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
And so then you start to say, like, this reminds me of that barberry that I saw in the Poconos. So there, and I'm not saying that non-native plants are bad. We grow hundreds of them. There are things that play nice. There are things that do great in the right spot. And we're never going to be a 100% native plant farm. We're not. But at the same time, we have to be mindful that, we're taking something and reproducing it by the thousands. So are you going to make plants that are going to help people and help the ecology? Or are you going to make plants that honestly could do some damage? And so that's kind of where we stand on that.
It's, I think we spoil our listeners sometimes because we present you with people that we align with value-wise.
Sure.
Yeah.
You don't always have that.
Yeah.
That's not, it's, I'd be lying if I didn't say there's people doing everything for the right reasons. And then there's people in our industry that just aren't. And I could give you a million examples, and I don't think it's necessary to go through that. That hurts all the rest of us as well. And we've lived through it. There's a reason why nursery business kind of ebbs and flows sometimes. Some of it's real estate and things like that, but it's, you go through, we've seen a lot of nurseries go out of business.
Yeah.
And it's, I think of, one of the examples is, and again, I'm not going to say names or anything like that, but this is going back probably 25 years. I was touring a nursery that was expanding vastly. And I was there with my boss at the time, and he was like, I'm noticing like all your planting is weeping cherry. Like, what's your market on that? Like, do you really have a need for that many weeping cherries? And they're like, market? They're like, this is all that was available. Like, everything's sold out. So we want to expand. So we're doing weeping cherries. Well, within a year, everyone was selling 2-inch caliber B&B weeping cherries for $25 because it killed the market. Or you have someone at a trade show with a hatchet through a 3-gallon Crimson Pygmy barberry saying everything's half price because the market did. And it killed the market. So you have people doing things for certain reasons. We're presenting you with the people that we we align with. So it's so refreshing to hear you say this, and it's nice to hear it because it's not every instance that everyone's thinking this way.
Right. Well, I know that, talking about that invasive species bill, I think it's long overdue. And I'm not the ecological person that's just going to beat this drum all day long, but there are people in this country still growing plants by the tens of thousands that they shouldn't be, and again, one man's invasive is another man's native. So you can't, for lack of a better term, you can't yuck somebody else's yum, but we have to be mindful of what we're doing. And, I always think about Coreopsis lanceolata, right?
Yeah.
That's apparently like the number one noxious weed in Japan. And I think about all the Japanese plants that we grow here that we are in love with. I'm like, I wonder what these plants do over there. Apparently a lot of damage.
Oh, black cherry's a big mess over there. Smooth cordgrass, like big problem.
Yeah.
Well, and I have a friend of mine who's a perennial grower in Germany, and he has a farm in Portugal where they sell tens of thousands of Imperata. And it's fine. Yeah. It's fine.
Yeah.
But, we're not there, and we have to be mindful of that.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
No, I think that's a great point. And like you, I think it's long overdue. In fact, it had passed and then got kind of tossed out before they got to the end of the road there.
Didn't quite make it across the finish line.
But it's disheartening to hear some of the pushback on it. And
Yeah, it's not like everyone's behind it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. In the nursery industry, there's a lot of opposition. I think the majority are probably on board with it. They get it.
I think it's the 80-20 rule. I think 80% of nurseries in New Jersey can perfectly get behind this and realize that it's something that's long overdue.
Yeah.
I think there's a few that are pushing back. For whatever reason, I'm not going to speculate because I'm not them.
Sometimes it's their livelihood. It's what they know and what they do, and
it's hard to say.
Their
I
livelihood.
Another when this invasive spill came up, another friend of ours said, I looked at the list. This represents about $1 million in sales, and so that's and I was like, he didn't say lost sales because he's like, but it gives me the opportunity to pivot and take those customers and point them to what I'd like them to buy.
Right.
And so he wasn't looking at it as a loss. He was saying, okay, I can remold these folks because he's like, some of this stuff I didn't want to grow. It's just that's what people wanted, so I had to. So now I can say, oh well, you can't buy this anymore. So why don't we point you over here instead?
Yeah, find me a tree grower that really loves to grow calorie.
Yeah.
No, there's probably 50 trees they'd rather sell you than that thing.
Exactly.
And this being long overdue, there were some versions of this bill that would have been detrimental to the industry. The current state that it's in, I just read the latest version last week. It's good. It's going to be good for our industry. I think, there will be people walking into garden centers, 2 years after this passed and say like, oh, I bought these miscanthus a few years ago. I want to put more in. And they're going to find out they can't get them. Mm-hmm. There will be a certain level of that. But then that's your connection point. Yeah. I'll be like, well, you know what? We can't sell it anymore, and here's why. And then you can say, here's all these things that you could do. Yeah. And here's why these are so much more beneficial to the world around you. Mm-hmm. That it starts a conversation. And so that's what we're looking for is there's not many plants on the list right now, and most of them shouldn't be on the market anyway. And B, it does give you that opportunity to educate a consumer where otherwise they would have bought it. Oh, Miscanthus adagio, that's what I got 3 years ago. I'll just buy 3 more of those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's amazing just when you find out what's important. Like, oh, birds are important to you? This is why you should really be thinking about these things. This is where you're going to be successful. Yeah. And it's just trying to find why they like those plants. And some of them, it's like, oh, that's not even the right plant. You don't even want that.
Oh, yeah.
You want this.
Could you imagine getting 5 minutes uninterrupted with a consumer in, let's say, Indiana and talk about the importance of spirobolas?
Yeah.
Or andropogon. and just blow their mind of, what some of these key species can do for things above and below ground.
Yeah.
Awesome. Before we go to the next thing, I just want to point out, because we're getting away from it, and I just want to point it out. I want to applaud you for what you're going through to make sure you're supplying the right plant, like aligning with the right people. But you also associate it with a bare root nursery where you're growing some of the stuff that maybe you can't find or you want to control better.
Yeah. So this started in the 90s. Where we were expanding a lot into daylilies, right? Daylilies were huge in the 90s. And we were working with a daylily breeder, Dr. Darrell Apps, still kicking, still doing some breeding work in Wisconsin. He was breeding reblooming daylilies, and he was bringing in material. At the time, he was living outside of Kennett Square. He had been working for Longwood at the time. And we couldn't find good bare root sources for this, Walter's Gardens was probably a tenth of what they are now, and daylilies wasn't something that they were really getting that deep into in terms of offering. And we were looking for, specialty varieties. We just couldn't find a good source for them. And so my grandfather had the wherewithal saying, we're going to set up a separate company. We're going to do this ourselves. And as long as it makes money or doesn't lose money, then it's worth us doing ourselves. And that's what we did. I think that started in 96 or 7. And once we kind of, cracked the code on daylilies, we said, okay, what else can we do? All right, what else can we do? And so it grew and grew, and now it's on its own farm. It's about 76 acres of production, of field production. We're now doing things like red twig dogwoods and black call viburnums,
awesome.
and you know, so we're using that space to do some of the deciduous shrub material, native deciduous material that takes a little bit longer to bulk up. Well, we're doing the bulking in the field rather than in a container.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. I just wanted to make sure we pointed that out before we moved on.
Yeah.
Oh, and very excited we have pawpaws in the field.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
We've got one sales rep who's asked me every year, when are we going to start growing pawpaws for like 12 years? I told him at our sales meeting this spring, we got pawpaws. Don't tell anybody, but they're coming. How far off? Probably 3 or 4 years, but they're coming.
They're coming. That's awesome. That's awesome. You are also very active in a lot of associations.
Probably 2 in excess.
You want to list what
no, honestly, so I'm semi-active in the New Jersey Nursery and Landscape Association. I do fully support what they're doing, trying to promote, nursery in New Jersey. It's a big deal. Nursery's a big deal in the terms of the ag industry in Jersey. It's the largest agricultural commodity by dollar volume.
Yeah, and it's not even a close margin.
No,
it's like 48%.
Yes.
So New Jersey Ag brings in $1.5 billion to the state, and
like 700 million.
And it's like
change.
750 million of that is nurseries, like 48.8% of the dollars, and then vegetables I think are next.
Yeah,
closest at like 19%.
So nursery's a big deal for New Jersey Ag, and New Jersey Nursery and Landscape Association. They just tried their best to highlight that and to make sure that we're not forgotten about in Trenton and we're not forgotten about in the public. And so I'm a little bit involved with them. Most of the rest of my time is taken up with the State Board of Agriculture. So I'm a member of the State Board of Ag right now. For those of you who aren't in New Jersey, it's interesting. It's a position that's basically elected upon by delegates to the New Jersey Ag Convention, which are basically members from everybody from NOFA to the New Jersey Holstein Growers Association to, the Hunterdon County Board of Ag. All these people send delegates to this convention, and they elect you from your industry. You represent your industry that you're elected to. There's 8 people on the board, 4 from North Jersey, 4 from South, and we all have to represent. Well, at least one member of the board has to represent the top 4 commodities. So right now that's hay and grain, vegetable, fruit, and nursery. So as long as there's one member from the board that represents each of those nurseries, that's what comprises it. And that is a lot of my time.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
I would imagine.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. I spent 7.5 hours in Trenton on Wednesday in one of the busiest weeks of our year. So
that's commendable.
Yes.
Though it really is, because someone has to do it, and preferably someone that represents us well.
Yeah,
I'm trying.
Yeah,
really hard.
It's important that nurseries have a voice on that. New Jersey has an interesting setup with how our Department of Agriculture is run too.
Yeah, so the state board selects the Secretary of Agriculture. It's a cabinet position, a gubernatorial cabinet position that's not selected by the governor. It's selected by the state board. And the department answers to the secretary. The secretary answers to the state board. And then we are all guided by resolutions that are decided upon and passed at the Ag Convention by those same delegates. It's a little unique, but it's basically built from the farmer up.
Yeah.
So the farmer tells the state board what to do. The state board finds the right person to then direct the Department of Ag to fulfill all those things. I did not think we would get this deep into Trenton politics on this. I'll be really honest with you. It's okay though. It's all right. It's a big chunk of my life.
Yeah. I guess I want to point that out, just highlight a lot of things that we've talked about there are a lot more complicated than they appear at the surface. You don't just start a plant brand, or you don't just pivot.
It's not cut and dry.
It's not cut and dry. There's a lot of gray.
Yeah. Did you always know that you wanted to be a part of the nursery?
No. Gosh, no. I'll keep it PG. But when I was a teenager, I was going to be a chemist. I really thought I was going to be a chemist because I wanted to mix stuff. That's like I just you see a chemist on TV or in a cartoon, and they're just mixing up potions and something. Like, oh man, that'd be fun. I'd like to be a chemist. And then then I got into high school and I really had no idea what to do. I was working summers at the farm, doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I'd help on the potting machine, or I'd help pull weeds, or I'd, just do remedial stuff that I didn't have to put my mind too much. And then probably late in high school, junior year, senior year, I kind of realized I was enjoying what I was doing. And I don't know when it started or where specifically it came from, but I got into my senior year of high school and I'd been early accepted to Penn State, not for their ag program, but for their marching band.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? Awesome.
So, I mean, for there's no YouTube here, but for the non-YouTube audience that's listening to us, I'm 6'4", I'm 320 pounds. I'm a big dude. I never wanted to play football. I only wanted to play drums. And so I was a band nerd, band geek, all through high school. And so, a lot of my friends wanted to be doctors or lawyers, and they were going to all these fancy schools. And I literally was looking at the best marching bands east of the Mississippi River.
Did you play snare or quints?
So I played snare all through high school.
Okay.
And when I thought I was a good player. I really did. Came from a small high school in Cumberland County. And I got to Penn State. I realized, boy, I really am not that great. I barely made the drum line.
Wow.
I started out playing cymbals.
Okay. Wow.
My sophomore year, I played bass drum.
All right.
My junior and senior year, I was lucky enough to play snare. I feel like we've lost Tom.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
No. It's I was
my youngest
our
son
marching band in high school in
Okay.
8th and 9th grade, and then Fran's was in the high school drum line.
He started in the pit in 8th grade, and then started with the smallest bass drum, worked up, and then his senior year he played quints.
Well, I tell you, so my only soiree in playing bass drum was that sophomore year, and they did it by height. The tallest guy got the biggest drum. Guess what I got?
Well,
I got the 32-incher.
And that's my son was a beanpole, but 6'3".
Oh, okay.
So he had the biggest one, and by the end of the year, his back was killing.
No,
him.
nothing inspired me to get better at playing drums than playing that bass drum for 6 months. Anyway, it kind of came time where I needed to at least declare as undeclared or declare a major. So it probably was, fall of senior year. And I had a conversation with my grandfather, and I said, look, at the time, my brother was a sophomore in college at Del Val. Mm-hmm. And I said, look, if I go to school for this, is there a spot for me? He goes, well, of course there's a spot for you. So what would I do? And he said, he's like, we will find you something to do. Mm-hmm. I was like, learn all you can about running a business, finance, marketing, the things I can't teach you. He said, I could teach you how to grow a plant. Mm-hmm. I could teach you how to take something small and turn it into something bigger and make it pretty and ship it out the door. I could teach you that all day long. Mm-hmm. I can't teach you amortization of a loan.
Yeah.
Or I can't teach you, how best to deal with your farm credit agent or any of that stuff. And so I just decided, I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. And so I got an ag business degree with a minor in economics, and a slightly smaller minor in drums and drinking. And 4 years later, I came out with a fiance and a fancy piece of paper. Mm-hmm. So,
Awesome. That's wonderful. And your siblings, I know your sister initially didn't go to school to stay. Did she find her? And shout out to Amy. I know she listens.
Okay, yes. Shout out to my sister. All right. So she went to a Jesuit school in Los Angeles called Loyola Marymount University. Mm-hmm. Very nice school. Awesome place. Not an ag school. And, so much so that one of her classmates thought that chocolate milk came from brown cows, like that sort of thing, right?
I will, before you go, I'll just share. So someone that we know that has a farm that I worked with, I don't want to say who it is because he married this person. But the first time he brought her to the farm, she was like, why don't your parents mow? And he's like, because that's a crop of wheat.
Yeah.
Like that's our crop. Like he didn't realize.
Why are you really letting this place go to the dogs, right? So anyway, she was majoring in communications. She kind of thought that she wanted to be on television. Thankfully, she doesn't have a face for radio like I do. And but that's what she wanted to get into, marketing or PR or broadcast journalism. And it was a great school for that. And she did internships. She met Rob Livingston from Band of Brothers and Office Space, and she met, I think it was Steven Spielberg and his wife, and did all these amazing things. And then she moved back to the East Coast, and she started looking for jobs, and she realized this is like, you got to start at the bottom of the bottom. You're basically an intern making minimum wage with $120,000 degree. And so she had been looking around throughout the summer, kind of taking her time, seeing where she could land. And that winter, I remember I was at my in-laws' house for Christmas. Brother calls me, logistics manager has put in his 2 weeks notice. Right? So this guy scheduled all the trucks, he talked to the customers, tried to upsell them on things when they needed to fill out something. And my brother says, I think Amy should do this. I was there. I didn't know I couldn't read the room. I was on a phone. And I said, you're probably right. We'll give her a shot. And she wasn't sure if she wanted to do it. She killed it. Killed it.
That's awesome.
The company is now almost 4 times the size it was when she took over the shipping department.
Yeah.
Wow.
And a lot of it's attributed to a lot of people that we have there, but we realized that, she was kind of the gatekeeper of metering what we could ship and how much we could ship, and just being a little bit more aggressive in that, and realizing what our people are capable of. Yeah. So shout out to my sister for that.
Yeah. Awesome.
And then I have an older brother who basically keeps the lights on, keeps the things running. He's dealing with operational things day to day, making sure the plants are growing right, making sure our head growers, keeping everything screwed on tight.
Did he know he wanted to be a part of the nursery?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So like it was like written down, like some golden tablet somewhere that says Donald will be, Yes.
When it's funny, like thinking of, so when I worked at Princeton Nursery, the Flemmer family, like they had mentioned to me when they were kids that they were told what their occupation was going to be. It's you're going to be a nurse, you're going to be a teacher, you can be a part of the nursery.
Right.
And they all ended up being a part of the nursery. They all had the other careers and then ended up at the nursery.
Yeah.
So
then that's the question we have about the 4th generation.
Yeah.
Is do you etch that thing in stone on a golden tablet or whatever? Or one of the things that we have to realize as the companies become more successful, it's easier to just say like, oh, we need more help, let's bring them on board. But I know that for our kids, yours and my kids, Fran's kids to an extent, there's a sense of entitlement that we need to sort of like break out of them. And so how do you find that sweet spot? And I think one of the things that we're probably going to try to do is try to make them go do something else for a while. Because if they want to get into this industry, they've really got to want it. I mean, like smack your fist down on the table and say, I want to do this. And we thankfully they're still young. We haven't had to jump off that bridge yet, but it's coming.
Well, there's a guy also on the state board who you're probably going to know who I'm talking about, but their family rule was you don't come back to the farm unless you've gotten another job and gotten promoted twice.
Oh, wow.
So it's like you can't even just go work somewhere else and then come back. You need to get promoted. You need to show that you're actually good at what you do.
But we've heard a lot of success. Like I think of Brad Gettinger from Long Island Natives, where he was a very successful, I don't know if it was sales rep for Black & Decker, and then decided, hey, I want to come back to the nursery. So my kids are 24 and 21. I made them both work here summers. My oldest said it motivated him to go to college, and because he didn't enjoy it. My youngest loved it. If it wasn't for the fact that he was going to pursue being a pilot, he would have gladly stayed here and worked.
I'd go the pilot route.
Yeah. He's my I 100% support that. But I at least wanted them to know, like that's how I started. Yeah, and this is what, depending on what route you take, this is what life is. So good or bad. I'm not saying like this is bad. Like this is to teach you a lesson. Just saying like, hey, this is what a large portion of people do for a living.
So is this a native plant or a healthy planet conversation that we're having?
I don't. I'm not sure what part it is.
All right, given that, just time, because I can't believe how long we've talked. We could probably talk for another hour and a half. We should probably ask the final question.
Okay.
So it's always the same question. Simple question, hardest question. What's your favorite native plant?
Yes. So my sister, when we first started talking about me doing this months ago, she's like, they're going to ask you what your favorite native plant is. I've been thinking about that for months.
That's awesome.
You know, it's tough. So the easy question is Spigelia marylandica. I love that plant. It's one of the few true reds that we have in terms of a mid-Atlantic native. I know it's not technically native to New Jersey, but we do grow it. I love it. I have it in my yard. It works in full sun. It works in the shade. It can be fairly neglected. Butterflies go after it. Hummingbirds go after it. It's a unique flower. I love that plant.
Awesome.
However,
And that's Indian pink, right?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I was at Mount Cuba yesterday to collect photography. And I walked through the trilliums. Man. It's one of those things where it's just, and I'm not a sappy guy. I'm not. But if you ever want to connect with something larger than yourself, either go to the redwood forest in California or find yourself a thicket of trilliums and walk through them.
Yeah.
There's something about that flower structure, the deep burgundy reds, the pure whites, man.
I agree.
And all the different foliage forms, the ones that almost look like somebody got down on their hands and knees and painted the leaves with streaks of teals and emeralds and different, almost like a silver sheen to them. Like there's something special about
I have a trillium illustration from the 1800s framed and on my wall at home. It's one of those things where, like, especially knowing in the nursery it takes 7 years to produce a bloom. Like that's why you don't see them really in the nursery trade. And every
that's a nut that I am willing to try to crack there.
And do yourself a favor if you've never been there, because this weekend would be the time to go because it's probably almost through peak period. But Bowman's Hill Wildflower Preserve in New Hope, PA. Between the trilliums and the Virginia bluebells and everything, it's just yeah.
It's sad that I'm always so busy this time of year, and I kind of committed myself that I'm just Mount Cuba for me is about a 50-minute drive, and I'm like, it'd be dumb for me not to just go over there every couple of weeks and just see what there is to see. So
it's one of our favorite places.
Yeah, so Spigelia marylandica, and then pretty much any trillium that you could get your hands on.
That's
How about that?
Fantastic. And I don't think anyone has ever mentioned either of those, but two fantastic choices.
Oh, yeah.
So wholeheartedly agree with you on the trilliums. There's just something magical.
They're special.
If you've never seen it, Redwood Rising has a video about not pulling the flowers off a trillium. That is one of the most entertaining videos. It's Griff Griffith's former guest, but he's talking about don't pull a plant's reproductive organs off. It's like, why would you give someone severed reproductive organs? And then he goes into the importance of trilliums and why they're so special and why you should look at them with awe. And it's pretty amazing.
And I know you don't see many people grow them. Gosh darn it, I'm going to try.
Man, I hope you do.
I mean, it might be a total failure. It also might be a $30 quart that I sell 20 of a year.
I think you'll sell them.
But
I do.
I mean, I just feel like it's something like we have to be willing to try.
That's awesome. Fantastic choices. So this is the part of the show where we do final thoughts, and we always start with our guests. Tom and I will take a turn also. But this is where we kind of hand the floor over to you. You can promote, summarize, mention something we didn't mention, but you can use time however you want.
Well, I mean, we hit everything from native plants to New Jersey politics. I don't know where else you take it from here. But, I just want to thank you guys for giving me the platform. I try not to come off as too spiely because when you're trying to market something, at the end of the day, you're trying to sell it. And I don't want to come off trying to sound like I'm just selling something.
I didn't get that feeling.
But, I just want to say that this has been the last couple of years getting deeper into this realm of our industry has been a very fun one. And I've gotten to know some pretty incredible people. Mm-hmm. And it's just one of those things where I'm often reminded, and sometimes I need to tell myself that we are really lucky to be in the nursery industry in a whole, not just natives. And I'm reminded by that when we try to hire somebody into our industry that's never been in it before. and people will tell me like, why is everyone so nice?
Yeah.
You know, we had somebody work for us that came out of the paper industry, and she's like, why is everyone so nice to me? I said, just don't ask that question. Just accept it and move on with your life. And then I had to realize, no, these are good people. And I've really enjoyed getting to know some more of them, you know, you guys and John and the people at Pizzo. And I mean, these are incredible people that I wouldn't have met otherwise. And so I've just enjoyed this portion of my life. We try to, you know, we always look at our sales, you know, as we hit these little plateaus, and then you look for something that's going to break you out of that funk and kind of push you over the edge. And, you know, right now we're looking at native plants. It's going to be that next big thing. And, you know, the timing was right for it. We had the right people in place, and we made the right connections to make it happen. And so that's where we are. That's where I find myself right now. You know?
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's always great. Like, not saying we don't love our jobs. We all love our jobs. But when you can find a deeper meaning to it just takes it to a whole nother level. And working here did that for me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even as soon as I started here. Like it took time, but I wouldn't change it.
Yes.
Like, I don't think I could go back.
Yeah.
And I think that's true of the nursery industry. We heard a presentation from the CEO of Ball Horticulture, and he was saying, you know, I come from M&M Mars.
Yeah.
And if I were walking down the street and the CEO from Nestle was walking towards me, I would have crossed the street and gave him the finger.
Yeah.
He's like, but here I can sit down with my biggest competitor and have dinner and have a laugh. And I think we're all fortunate that we're able to do that.
Yeah.
So
I've known our biggest competitor. I've known him since I was 3.
Yeah.
And we're still friends to this day.
That's
It's
awesome.
like, you know, it's a different world. It really is a different world.
Awesome. You want to go, or you want me to go?
Yeah, I can go. And basically I wanted to say that for 4 years now that we've been doing this podcast, one of the things we get asked the most is where people can find native plants, or if they can get plants from us, or if they aren't in our area, where can they get them? And that's been one of our priorities, is to showcase where they can get native plants. And since we've started, there are way more options now than there were. So I'm really happy to say that. And when you guys started the brand, Fran and I were both really excited, one, that it was happening, just because now we had someplace we can point people to.
I think we like, one of the things we said was, I don't even care if I'm a part of this. Yeah. Like, this is awesome. Yeah. And we want to support this.
Yeah. And then, because, like, again, we have so many people saying, well, why aren't other nurseries getting on board this? And I'm like, it takes time.
It takes time and work.
And and then when you guys said that you'd want to sponsor some of our episodes, we were overjoyed with that too.
Yeah, we thought it was a pretty good fit.
Yeah. It's so no, we're happy to have you guys on board. I'm happy to showcase you guys here too, and have an episode just about what you guys do and how you came to this, to kind of really showcase that you're doing it the right way. One, and yeah, just know I'm glad to see how, I'm really excited to see how it works going forward, because I think it's really going to take off for you. And for listeners, hey, there's something else you can go and find in your local garden center now, especially if you're in the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast.
Yep.
You can show up to a garden center. They have established relationships with these places already. So it's just going to be added to the product line.
Yeah, if you don't see it, ask for it. And there's no easier way, if you're trying to help guide a friend, to send them somewhere and tell them to look for this.
Yeah.
It's easy, because they can ask.
It's a supply chain where the garden center doesn't have to find a new vendor at this point. Yeah. They're already working with this nursery, so now they can just say, hey, can you send me some of this too?
And coming to a Texas garden center near you, hopefully in the coming years.
But here's the other thing. We all talk the talk. You have to walk the walk. If you want this to happen, you have to support it. So promote it, buy it, recommend it. Yeah. Because you want it to be successful. You can't just say, I've asked for it, now I got it.
Yeah. And fingers crossed your neighbors accidentally get some native plants too.
Yes. Or buy your neighbor a native plant. Don't tell them it's native. Just buy them one.
Yeah. It'll look pretty.
Yes. Yeah. So my thought kind of goes twofold. I feel very fortunate, especially after having this wonderful conversation, that we're fortunate to keep the company that we keep. And I can't thank you enough for being a part of this. And I can't thank you enough for allowing us to be a small part of it, and just to know that you're doing this and be able to have these conversations.
I'll come back anytime.
Awesome.
No politics next time.
Awesome. I think it goes twofold with, it's not just business-wise, who the company we keep, it's also our listeners. And John, Mark, Courtney, and I just had this conversation the other day that I feel pretty good that when this is all said and done and we walk away from this, I feel that the good done by our listeners will far exceed anything that you and I were able to accomplish.
Yeah.
We have listeners writing syndicated articles and helping municipalities and educating and doing it all the right ways. And I feel just very fortunate that it's twofold. It goes it goes up and it goes down with the listeners and our friends that we call competitors sometimes. You know, and it's just a great position to be in, and we're very fortunate to do that. So thank you.
Awesome.
I appreciate it.
Anytime, guys.
All right. Well, that's going to wrap us up for today. Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed listening to Bob Blue. For more information, visit their website, which is bluelabel.com. And that's a BLEW label.com, not BLUE.
Yes.
I almost spelled the regular blue wrong, the color blue wrong. That would have been embarrassing, wouldn't it? So, we appreciate you joining us for another episode of Native Plants, Healthy Planet, presented by Pinelands Nursery.
Thank you to the Egocentric Plastic Men for contributing our theme music. Make sure you stream or other songs wherever you consume your music. You can even see them live if you'd like. They're in and around the Philadelphia area. You can follow us, if you'd like, on Twitter at Pineland Nursery, Facebook at Pinelands Nursery NJ, Instagram at Native Plants _Healthy Planet, or at Pinelands Nursery, and also YouTube at Pinelands Nursery. Don't forget about the question and comment line. You can call us at 215-346-6189. I will repeat that, 215-346-6189. Ask a question, leave a comment. We'll do our best to play it on a future episode of The Buzz. And our Native Plants Healthy Planet Facebook group, like every time I look, like has a few hundred new members.
Yeah.
And and we haven't, like, no moderation alerts, like, no, we have an issue.
Yeah.
It's all been, like...
Nothing bad. All good stuff over there.
Should I get my dad on there?
Yeah. I think he'd be a good contributor
I
over
think
there,
he
too.
would be a good contributor. Sign him up.
Yeah.
Sign him up.
Podcast merch. You can visit our website, and it takes you to our Teespring store. You guys know most of the deal with that, where we're not keeping any profits. We give it all away. But there's a big update.
I had a very cool conversation yesterday.
Okay. Well, I don't know what that conversation
What's
is.
your update?
But the big update is I've not updated any of the shirts, but I found the way to make share it and invite other members of the team to do stuff.
And I shared it with our
and we have
designer.
literally a former clothing designer on staff for over a year now, and I have
that
not
worked for
had
a very well known and
I have not had her designing our shirts because I didn't know how to enable her to do that, but now I did.
I shared the information
Yeah.
with her, and I've never seen anyone get so excited to be able to work on merchandise. So it may not be till summertime.
So so we'll have some cooler things, not just like giant font on fronts of shirts that say "Plant Native Plants." We'll have some different stuff now too,
We'll have
including
some
our
cool
new
stuff.
logo.
Yes.
So and then you can listen to our podcast really wherever you listen to now, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or on our website. So you can find it there as well. Do us a favor, leave a 5-star review, subscribe if you haven't already.
It's amazing how the reviews tail off when we're not giving something
I know.
away.
Oh, did I tell you that there's another giveaway?
You did tell me, but we haven't shared it.
So, we talked about, we're not going to do this yet. This is a future giveaway. So get your reviews in now because that's an entry when we do unveil this. I talked about the Native Spice Co. and how they were doing it. It was the juniper berry, spice bush, and what was the other thing in it?
Juniper berry, spice bush, and sumac.
And sumac. Really good. They offered to give away a couple bottles to a winner. So they liked the book giveaway and they said, we'll donate something so you can give it away too.
Get the reviews in now.
Get the reviews in, and then we'll announce that sometime in the near future so you can win some something to cook with.
Yes.
A little different.
Awesome.
So, all right.
And then we need food picks.
Yeah, exactly. With that, thank you, everyone. I'm Tom.
And I am Fran. Thank you again, everyone. Bob, again, thank you so much.
Thank you, gentlemen.
This has been wonderful. Coming up next week, we have a Buzz episode, so make sure you tune in for that. And until then, keep it native.
Woods, wetlands, and dales grows a bounty of beauty that never fails. Our native plants, so diverse and so rare, treasures of our land beyond compare. From the ferns below, soaring oaks above, each plant has a place each plant needs love. Monarch caterpillars launch fresh milk, wheat so tall, bees buzzed about, sipping nectar from all. Oh, native plants, how you grace this land. In your diversity, we will take a stand. To protect and preserve our generations to come, their beauty and potency second to none. To protect and preserve the earth, to restore the native plant movement you just can't ignore.
Goldenrod, asters, and flowers galore. Monarch is so stunning, can't help but adore. Their colors, their fragrance, a feast for the eyes. Their value to wildlife, no need to disguise.
Native plants, how you grace this land. In your diversity, we will take a stand.
Thank you for listening to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Remember to like, share, follow, and comment.